Hello, and welcome to this video presentation of the ANZ Championship Data Visualization. My name is Robbie Fordyce with the student number 300-262-835, and I'll be walking you through my application. The project was originally developed in Chrome, and it was using a mixture of HTML5, JavaScript, D3, Processing.js, and a collection of small web libraries. To see the visualization in action, open your favorite browser, mine's Chrome, and navigate to the URL robbiefordyce.kiwi.nz/ANZ Championship. Let's begin. Welcome to the user interface. For the remainder of this demonstration, I will initially run through the application, first showing off the functionality, and then when this is done, I will run through a second time to engage with the critiquing component of this presentation. You'll see upon page load that the user is presented with a tabular structure that holds the data provided in the CSV files. Each row of the table corresponds to a match that occurred at some point throughout the history of the championship. Presented to us are key bits of data, such as who the match was between, both the home team and the away team, where the match was played, and on which date this match took place. You'll notice up the top that we have the column headings, which are interactive. By simply clicking on a heading, we can restructure the table into either alphabetical order, reverse alphabetical order, or we can revert it back to the initial order. This feature is particularly good for quickly accessing data that lives at the very end of the dataset. Another way we can traverse and restructure the dataset is by clicking on the page navigator at the bottom right of the table. Here we have buttons for going to the next page and going to the previous page. If we're looking to jump through the data quickly, we can hit the first page to instantly return back to the beginning of the data, or we can knock on this 88 to travel to the end of the data set. So this is all well and good. We have a way of sorting the information, but I bet you're dying to know what all of this hocus pocus at the bottom of the screen is all about. Well, with any good table, you'll know that in addition to sorting comes the requirement for querying. The tools at the bottom of the screen provide us with a way of filtering the dataset, only displaying the results which fall within the specifications that we, the user, provide. This system was based upon the realization that when people are presented with a new data excerpt for the first time, their initial response is to try and describe what it is that they are seeing in a single sentence. Plain English. And so this is what I've tried to replicate in the design. So you want to show matches that happened at the TSB arena? No problem. Simply hit the filter at to add it to your list of current filters. Select the filter to change, and then enter your value within the drop-down selection box. Boom. You'll notice that as we did that, the string representation of our search query was updated. This string is a nice way of instantly being able to refer to what it is actually that the user is looking at any given time. Because as you know, with data filtering, things can get pretty confusing pretty fast. Now, at is only one search filter. We may instead want to show only a type of team. We need a featuring filter for that. I want to see matches at the TSB arena that include Wellington's Central Pulse. You'll see how easy it is to manipulate search queries with a selection change. Now I want to look at matches where an Australian team face the Central Pulse at the TSB arena. We can incorporate dates with the from and until filters. Here we specify time using the date selector. The final two filters, in and as, filter by country and round specifically. In allows us to select New Zealand or Australia, or both countries. As allows us to select whether we want to see matches that were played as a general round, or as something a bit more substantial, such as a semi-final, or even a grand final. Oops, we've provided too specific a search query, and now we've narrowed our search to 0 results. So I guess the next question is, how do we go about removing a search filter? Now, by selecting an active search filter, we can double-click upon the bar to remove it from the current query. The table reverts back to how it was before the query was added. Boom. Essentially, this is part one of the visualization that aims to present the user with handy and powerful controls for extracting exactly what they want from the dataset. And as you see now, we are back to our original table. So by clicking on the arrow at the left, we can fade across to part two of the visualization. And here we're presented with more of a visual component. Hubs in New Zealand and Australia can be scrolled over to see where it is regionally that we're talking about in this visualization. So here we're looking at Melbourne, and here we're back over in Wellington. So you'll notice that in addition to the region that pops up here, the date is also apparent. And this is a key point because this visualization, unlike the traditional graph, is actually animated over time. The big play button up the top left starts the system clock, and when that clock coincides with a match in the dataset, a circular pulse will appear on the map. So let's try that now. So what was it that we just saw? All the pulses are different colours, and this colour is actually deliberate, as it corresponds to the threads of the individual netball teams. So when we see a yellow pulse, we know that it was the central pulse that was involved in that game. Furthermore, as the pulse emanates outwards, the circular border of the central pulse's logo down the bottom will flash to life. As you can see by the filters up the top, a pulse occurred for both teams in the match that occurred at a given time in the visualization. We can change this so that it only shows pulses for the winning teams or for the losing teams. Furthermore, the across drop-down changes the length of time that this animation will cover. At the moment, we are currently viewing all the results over the period of 2008 to 2013. We have provided options through this drop-down to make the results season-specific. Finally, the size as specification changes what the width of the individual pulses are based upon. We can set this to be the total sum of all goals scored in the match, or to be the goal difference between the winning and losing teams in that match. What's quite cool is that we can actually change these settings dynamically during execution. Because the processing script is updated upon a frame-by-frame basis, changing the size source mid-presentation will apply these changes instantly and will allow the animation to carry on without any need to hit resume or accept a confirm box. So that's the visualization in a nutshell. Now I'll return to the text table and discuss the criticisms of and/or the avenues of improvement for this design. When conceptualizing this project, I talked to friends and family who actively work with visualizations and data management in their jobs. The response was that overwhelmingly, when you're working with data, often you just want the information in front of you, and you don't actually need a fancy visualization mode that may impact upon the clarity of the data communicated. For this reason, I decided to invest half of the project into developing an efficient means of displaying and working with the data. You'll notice that on mouse over, the table rows light up. Initially it was intended that by clicking upon the row, it would actually open a more stylized screen where score data and a few pictures of the teams in the match would be shown. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, this wasn't able to have been implemented. However, I feel as if I should have removed the highlight on the rows because this implies that these components are interactive when really they're not. Now, the decision was made at the start to limit the table size to 5 entries per page. This meant that I didn't have to write heaps of controls for resizing the rows upon a view change, and goodness knows the table library that I was working with was difficult enough as it is. However, from a user perspective, the reduced view could be annoying, especially if you want to compare 10 or 20 matches at once. There's nothing more frustrating than having to try and remember data that you've just seen while you're navigating through pages in order to find the data entry that you want to compare it to. Now, the interaction for double-clicking to remove a filter isn't clear, and without this video or alternate instruction, I feel as if users would not understand how to activate this functionality due to its unintuitiveness. Perhaps in a future design, I could have placed a small crossbow on the top left of each filter bar, and when this was clicked, the filter would be removed. Or the process of simply dragging a filter off of the filter bar could be a conceptually more intuitive way of disabling certain features. Now, there are quite a few criticisms for page 2, and again, these largely come back down to a shortage of time to further develop features. The biggest criticism is in terms of clarity. What is the data actually telling me besides looking pretty? Sure, there are colour associations to teams, central positions of pulses to reveal match venues, and larger widths to give indications of interesting scores. But the problem is that matches are scheduled so that they appear on the visualization as bursts. And when a burst comes, it's very difficult to take in all that information at once. Perhaps on mouse over of a region circle, the user could see a dialog where the stats from the most recent match that happened there are displayed. That way, if you saw a particularly large pulse and were interested by it, you could mouse over the origin to find out in more detail. Finally, if I was to develop this further, I would want to add some form of a running leaderboard for all teams so that at any point in time, the user had an understanding of the championship standings. This could be text-based and could live at the side of the visualization screen. Or another idea was to make the individual team netballs at the bottom shuffle around dynamically, so that the leftmost one was always coming first and the rightmost one was always coming last. Visually, this could be a bit messy, and so another idea is that you could swap the movement for a change in scale. Therefore, the netball of the top team would be at 100% of the picture resolution, while the netball of the bottom team would be a great deal smaller, although it would still be visible. And that wraps up this video documentary for the ANZ Championship visualization. I hope you enjoyed the interface and that it proves as useful to you as it has to me in revealing interesting trends in the dataset.